She grew up inside a house where silence carried more authority than affection. Her father's presence dominated every room long before he ever spoke a word. At school events and business dinners, he was praised as disciplined and admirable. At home, he ruled through disappointment, precision, and carefully chosen emotional distance. Nothing she did ever felt enough, no matter how perfectly she followed his expectations. Praise was rare, conditional, and usually withdrawn before it could settle inside her. She learned early that approval was not a gift, but a temporary privilege. Mistakes were remembered longer than achievements, especially when made in public. Her identity slowly shrank into whatever version caused the least resistance. Love, she discovered, was something earned, not something given freely. Her mother existed mostly as an absence, physically present but emotionally unreachable. Family dinners felt formal, quiet, and tense, like meetings with unspoken agendas. Every decision about her future was made without her participation or consent. Her father spoke often about legacy, control, and reputation, never about happiness. She listened, nodded, and obeyed, believing obedience was the closest path to peace. Friends noticed her politeness, but never her fear, which lived carefully hidden. At night, she replayed conversations, wondering which version of herself he tolerated most. She stopped sharing opinions because disagreement always carried consequences. Her world became smaller, shaped by avoidance rather than choice. Invisibility slowly became her most reliable survival strategy. Publicly, her father encouraged discipline, ambition, and strength as virtues. Privately, he dismantled confidence with surgical accuracy and calculated disappointment. He corrected her posture, her tone, her ambitions, and eventually her sense of worth. Failure was treated not as a lesson, but as proof of inherent weakness. When relatives praised her, his silence communicated disapproval more loudly than anger. She began doubting her instincts, deferring constantly to his judgment. Even success felt unsafe, because it invited scrutiny rather than celebration. She learned to anticipate criticism before it arrived, rehearsing apologies internally. Her emotions became inconvenient obstacles she trained herself to suppress. What remained was a daughter shaped entirely by fear of disapproval. Despite everything, she still hoped something might change with time. She believed effort could eventually soften the distance between them. Every achievement felt like another attempt to earn permanent acceptance. She imagined a future where approval would finally turn into affection. But each year only reinforced the same quiet truth she avoided naming. Her father did not see a daughter, only an extension of his authority. Her value existed only in how well she reflected his control. Love was never withheld accidentally, it was withheld intentionally. And without realizing it, she was already being prepared for abandonment. The breaking point had not arrived yet, but it was inevitable. The moment everything changed did not arrive with shouting or chaos. It arrived quietly, disguised as another conversation she thought she could survive. Her father sat across from her, calm, controlled, already certain of his decision. He spoke about responsibility, embarrassment, and consequences as if reading a report. An opportunity she had worked years to secure had been dismantled without warning. A phone call he made quietly erased her future with professional efficiency. He explained that she was not ready, not deserving, not aligned with the family image. His tone carried finality, not anger, which made resistance feel pointless. She listened, frozen, realizing her life had been edited without her consent. That was the moment she understood obedience had never guaranteed protection. She tried to explain herself, carefully choosing words that might soften his resolve. He interrupted with a sentence that would stay with her for years. "You were never strong enough to represent this family," he said without hesitation. The words were not shouted, they were delivered with practiced indifference. Her mother remained silent, eyes lowered, choosing peace over defense. No one argued, no one questioned the decision, No one acknowledged her pain. The room felt smaller as her future collapsed in real time. She realized this was not discipline, but deliberate erasure. What hurt most was not the loss, but the ease with which it happened. Her presence, she learned, was always negotiable. That night, she packed without knowing where she would go. Her belongings fit into a single bag, as if her life had already been minimized. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no attempts to stop her. Her father watched silently, satisfied that order had been restored. He reminded her she was leaving without support, money, or his name. He framed it as a lesson, one she would thank him for someday. She stepped outside, feeling detached from her own body. The house behind her looked unchanged, indifferent to her absence. She stood still, realizing she had never been truly inside it. For the first time, she belonged nowhere. As she walked away, shame fought against disbelief inside her chest. Part of her still searched for logic that could justify what happened. Another part understood this was not impulsive or accidental. This outcome had been prepared slowly through years of control. She felt stripped not only of safety, but of identity itself. Without her father's approval, she no longer knew who she was allowed to be. Fear crept in, followed closely by an unfamiliar sense of clarity. Nothing had been left to return to. Whatever she became next would happen without permission. And something inside her quietly broke, making room for something colder. The city she arrived in did not offer reinvention, only anonymity. She took the first job that would pay without asking questions. Long hours replaced ambition, and exhaustion replaced hope. Each shift reminded her how easily people could be reduced to functions. She avoided mirrors because they reflected someone unfamiliar and diminished. Her father's voice followed her everywhere, correcting, doubting, evaluating. Even alone, she measured herself by standards he had designed. Independence felt fragile, constantly threatening to collapse. She survived day to day, never planning far enough to feel disappointment. Freedom without direction quickly turned into quiet panic. Money disappeared as quickly as it arrived, leaving nothing stable behind. She shared rooms with strangers who never learned her name. Meals became calculated choices rather than moments of rest. She lied about her past because truth invited uncomfortable questions. Every rejection reinforced the belief that she was inherently replaceable. She considered reaching out to her family more than once. Each time, pride fought desperation until exhaustion ended the argument. Asking for help felt like confirmation of everything he believed. So she remained silent, carrying hunger and doubt with equal weight. The world offered no sympathy, only consequences. Some nights, she replayed her life as if searching for errors she missed. She wondered which version of herself might have deserved protection. Memories of comfort now felt foreign, almost imagined. She blamed herself for trusting a system designed to control her. Small failures felt catastrophic, echoing his intolerance for weakness. She avoided risk, convinced mistakes would permanently define her. Fear disguised itself as caution, limiting every possible path forward. She became efficient at surviving, terrible at believing. Confidence eroded quietly, without a single dramatic collapse. Her identity continued dissolving into something smaller and harder. The lowest point did not arrive suddenly. It accumulated slowly. One evening, after another shift ended early, she had nowhere urgent to go. She sat alone, calculating how long she could continue like this. The answer frightened her more than she expected. Returning home felt impossible. Moving forward felt unrealistic. For the first time, she acknowledged how close she was to disappearing entirely. Not dying, but erasing herself to avoid further disappointment. The realization felt heavy, but also strangely honest. She was not failing temporarily, she was unraveling systematically, and nothing in her life was yet strong enough to stop it. The breaking moment arrived through betrayal rather than confrontation. A job she had slowly earned began to stabilize her life and routine. For the first time, effort seemed capable of building something permanent. Then one morning, she was called into a quiet office without explanation. Her position had been terminated due to a conflict of interest she did not understand. A familiar surname appeared on a document she was never meant to see. Her father's influence had followed her farther than she believed possible. He had intervened again, not to help, but to remind her of reach. The message was unmistakable. Distance did not equal escape. Control extended far beyond proximity. She confronted him through a brief, restrained message she never sent. Words formed and collapsed repeatedly before leaving her phone. She realized explanation had never altered his decisions before. The power imbalance remained exactly as it always had been. That was when a new understanding settled without emotion. As long as she reacted, he retained authority over her direction. Resistance kept her connected to the role he assigned. Pain itself became a form of participation in his control. The realization was not angry, it was clarifying. Detachment suddenly felt like the only remaining option. That night, something essential shifted inside her perspective. She stopped framing herself as a daughter seeking fairness. She saw herself instead as an independent variable in a hostile system. The desire to be understood dissolved completely. In its place grew something colder and more precise. She no longer needed validation, only leverage. Her father had taught her how power functioned without ever intending to. Rules existed only to protect those who enforced them. The system could be learned, anticipated, and eventually redirected. Emotion was no longer useful. By morning, she made a decision that felt irreversible. She would stop running and start studying the structure that crushed her. Her past identity, shaped by fear and obedience, no longer served survival. The daughter he dismissed was no longer relevant. What emerged instead was someone attentive, disciplined, and patient. She would not seek revenge through chaos or exposure. She would operate within systems, quietly and efficiently. Time would become her greatest asset. The war ahead would not be emotional, but strategic. And the transformation had finally begun. She disappeared from every place that still recognized her former name. No announcement marked the transition, only deliberate withdrawal and silence. She relocated to a city where history carried no weight. Her routines became intentional, structured, and carefully protected. She chose a field of study that mirrored her father's world of influence. Numbers, systems, and contracts replaced emotion as her primary language. Every concept she learned gave her distance from her past self. Knowledge became a form of insulation against manipulation. For the first time, progress felt internal rather than performative. She was rebuilding from foundation rather than repair. Failure no longer triggered panic, only analysis and adjustment. She treated mistakes as data rather than proof of inadequacy. This shift slowly restored confidence without relying on external approval. She studied power dynamics with detached curiosity. Influence, she learned, was rarely loud and never impulsive. Those who controlled outcomes rarely appeared dominant in public. They waited, observed, and positioned themselves patiently. Her father's lessons resurfaced, stripped of emotional attachment. What once hurt now instructed. Pain was no longer personal, it was informative. Her social circle remained intentionally limited and strategic. She listened more than she spoke, collecting patterns and intentions. People revealed themselves easily when they believed they were leading. Trust became selective, earned through consistency rather than familiarity. She no longer shared vulnerabilities as currency for connection. Privacy became non-negotiable, a boundary she defended fiercely. The absence of emotional chaos brought clarity she had never known. Calm replaced anxiety as her default state. For the first time, she felt ahead rather than behind. Momentum slowly replaced survival. Occasionally, memories of her family resurfaced without intensity. They appeared as reference points, not emotional wounds. She no longer imagined reconciliation or apology. Those fantasies had belonged to someone else. Her focus remained firmly on capability and autonomy. Each achievement reinforced internal alignment rather than external validation. She measured success by independence rather than recognition. The woman she was becoming required no permission. The past no longer dictated the future's boundaries, and for the first time, control belonged entirely to her. She returned without announcement, carrying a name that no longer raised suspicion. Her presence entered her father's world through networks he respected. Introductions happened indirectly, framed by credentials rather than history. He noticed her competence before recognizing her face. To him, she was simply another capable professional navigating familiar territory. She observed his habits carefully, noting where confidence masked dependency. Power had aged him differently than she expected. Influence still followed him, but loyalty had grown conditional. Time had introduced cracks no authority could fully conceal. She understood patience would expose them. She positioned herself near decisions without appearing central to them. Her role granted access without visibility, the safest place to operate. She listened during meetings, absorbing priorities and unspoken tensions. Alliances revealed themselves naturally when pressure increased. She learned who feared him, who relied on him, and who resented him quietly. His control depended less on respect and more on routine. Disruption, she realized, did not require confrontation. It required subtle shifts in dependency. Each adjustment weakened the structure without alerting its architect. The system began responding to her presence without recognizing its source. Occasionally, their paths crossed in neutral settings. He acknowledged her politely, unaware of their shared history. The absence of recognition felt more powerful than confrontation. She spoke confidently, never referencing familiarity or lineage. Her composure unsettled him in ways he could not articulate. Something about her challenged his expectations without explanation. He sensed competence where he expected submission. Authority reacted poorly to what it could not categorize. Distance protected her advantage. Recognition would come later, on her terms. As momentum shifted, consequences unfolded with quiet inevitability. Decisions he once controlled began bypassing his approval. Trust redistributed itself toward newer, more adaptable figures. He blamed changing markets, unreliable partners, external pressure. She ensured nothing appeared intentional or personal. The system simply evolved without him at its center. When he finally recognized her, understanding arrived too late. She met his gaze without fear or explanation. No accusation followed, only clarity. The end had already begun. The collapse did not arrive with scandal or public spectacle. It unfolded gradually, disguised as ordinary setbacks and unfortunate timing. Contracts dissolved, partnerships weakened, and confidence quietly evaporated. People who once sought his approval now avoided extended conversations. Meetings ended sooner, decisions moved forward without his input. He felt authority slipping, but could not identify a single cause. Control, once absolute, now required negotiation and compromise. The shift unsettled him more than open opposition ever could. Power lost invisibility before it lost function, and once seen, it could not be restored. Inside his private world, certainty gave way to irritation and suspicion. He questioned advisors who had once agreed without hesitation. Loyalty revealed itself as conditional, transactional, temporary. The family name still carried weight, but less obedience. Silence replaced admiration in rooms he used to dominate. He searched for betrayal rather than structural change. Pride prevented him from recognizing how the system had evolved. Adaptation had never been his strength. Authority rooted in fear rarely survives independence. The foundation he trusted began rejecting his presence. She watched from close enough to confirm every fracture. Her involvement remained untraceable, protected by process and protocol. Each outcome aligned precisely with what she had anticipated. Nothing accelerated, patience preserved credibility. She understood collapse felt slower from the inside. He still believed recovery was possible through force or correction. But leverage had already redistributed beyond his reach. Resistance only exposed how little remained to control. For the first time, he experienced uncertainty without refuge. And uncertainty unsettled him more than failure. When recognition finally connected cause to consequence, it felt humiliating. He realized her presence had not been coincidental or accidental. She had not attacked. She had repositioned reality itself. The realization stripped him of language and authority simultaneously. He sought confrontation, explanation, acknowledgement of grievance. She offered none of it. Her silence communicated something he had never tolerated. Indifference removed the last illusion of relevance. Justice did not arrive through punishment. It arrived through irrelevance. The final meeting was brief, unplanned, and devoid of ceremony. They sat across from each other in a space that once belonged entirely to him. Time had reduced the room's authority without altering its appearance. He studied her face, searching for familiarity and control. What he found instead was calm, measured, and inaccessible. She did not wait for permission to speak, nor did she raise her voice. Her presence no longer responded to his expectations. The imbalance he once enforced had dissolved completely. For the first time, he faced someone beyond his influence, and it unsettled him deeply. He attempted explanation, justification, and reframing of the past. Each word revealed how dependent he remained on authority and narrative. She listened without interruption, not out of respect, but completion. Nothing he said altered the outcome already in motion. She did not seek apology, recognition, or acknowledgement of harm. Those needs belonged to someone she no longer was. Her expression never hardened, nor did it soften. Detachment protected clarity where emotion once distorted truth. Power had changed hands long before this conversation. This moment was merely confirmation. When she finally spoke, her words were deliberate and contained. "You taught me everything I needed," she said, without emphasis. He reacted instantly, misinterpreting the statement as gratitude. She continued, before illusion could settle. "You showed me how control works and how it fails." The silence that followed carried more weight than accusation. He understood then that nothing could be corrected or reversed. What he lost was not position, but relevance. She did not threaten or explain further. Excess language would have weakened the truth. She stood, concluding the exchange without closure or forgiveness. There was no dramatic exit, only quiet certainty. The door behind her closed without finality or echo. She walked away without looking back or carrying residue. Her life no longer required opposition to define direction. Freedom arrived not through revenge, but through autonomy. The past lost authority the moment it stopped guiding decisions. What remained was control rooted in self-definition. Justice was not about his suffering. It was about her release.